I was standing in my son Brandon's kitchen when his hand connected with my face for the 12th time. My cheek burned like fire, and I could taste blood where my teeth had cut the inside of my mouth. My ears were ringing so loud I could barely hear my daughter-in-law Amber laughing in the corner. She was actually counting them out loud, like it was some kind of sick game. I came here 3 months ago after my husband died, hoping my only child would give me comfort during the darkest time of my life. Instead, I got this. But what Brandon didn't know was that I still had the keys to everything. Let me back up and explain how I ended up in this nightmare. 6 months ago, my husband Gerald died suddenly from a heart attack. We had been married for 42 years. He was my best friend, my rock, my everything. When he collapsed in our garden one spring morning, I felt like my entire world shattered. The grief was overwhelming. Some days I could barely get out of bed. The house we had shared for decades felt empty and haunted without him. At first, Brandon seemed like the supportive son I had always known. He called me every single day, sometimes twice. He told me he loved me, that he was worried about me, that I should not be alone. He and Amber invited me to come stay with them in their beautiful 3-bedroom house in the suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona. It seemed like a blessing at the time. What I need to explain is that I had actually co-signed the mortgage on that house. 2 years earlier, Brandon could not qualify for the loan alone because of his student loan debt from pharmacy school. He owed over $80,000 in student loans, and his credit was not great. So Gerald and I put down $50,000 for the down payment, and I co-signed the mortgage papers. We trusted Brandon completely. He was our only child, and we wanted to help him build a life with Amber. 3 months ago, after the funeral, after weeks of crying alone in that empty house, I decided to accept Brandon's invitation. I sold the family home where I had raised him. It was a modest 3-bedroom ranch in a quiet neighborhood, but it sold for $325,000. The market was good, and we had paid off the mortgage years ago. Brandon suggested I put the money in a joint account with him. He said he could help me invest it and manage it since I was not good with finances. Gerald had always handled the money in our marriage. I felt lost and confused, still deep in grief, so I agreed. I trusted my son. Why would I not? When I moved in, everything seemed fine for the first few weeks. Brandon and Amber were welcoming. They gave me the guest bedroom, helped me unpack, made me feel wanted. But slowly, things started to change. It was subtle at first. Brandon would get irritated when I asked simple questions. Amber started making comments about me being in the way. They would whisper to each other when I walked into a room and then stop talking. They would laugh about something and refuse to tell me what was funny. The cruelties were small at first. They would eat dinner without telling me, leaving me to find leftovers or make something for myself. They would go out to movies or restaurants without inviting me. When I was watching television in the living room, they would come in and change the channel without asking. Amber started leaving passive-aggressive notes around the house about dishes in the sink or towels not folded the right way. I felt invisible in my own son's home. I felt like a burden. 2 weeks ago, things escalated. Brandon started asking about the money. He said he had a business opportunity, an investment that would triple our money in 6 months. He wanted to put $200,000 into it. I hesitated. Something felt wrong about it. I told him I needed that money for my future, that I was thinking about buying a small condo so I would not be in their way forever. Brandon exploded. He yelled at me for the first time in his adult life. He said I was living rent-free in his house, eating his food, using his electricity and water. He said I owed them. He said I was ungrateful and selfish. Amber stood behind him, nodding and adding her own commentary about how difficult I was to live with. I was shocked. I tried to explain that I had helped them buy this house, that I was only here temporarily, that I was still grieving. Brandon did not want to hear it. He stormed out and did not speak to me for 3 days. Then came this morning. I was making coffee in the kitchen when I accidentally knocked over Amber's designer purse. Coffee spilled all over it. It was an expensive bag, I knew that. She had mentioned once that it cost $1,200. I immediately grabbed paper towels and started trying to clean it up, apologizing over and over. Amber came into the kitchen and started screaming at me. She called me a useless old hag. She said I was clumsy and stupid. She said I did it on purpose because I was jealous of her nice things. I tried to explain it was an accident, that I would pay to have it cleaned or replaced, but she would not listen. That is when Brandon came home early from his job as a pharmaceutical sales rep. Amber ran to him, crying, telling him I had thrown coffee at her on purpose. It was a complete lie, but he believed her instantly. He grabbed me by the shoulders, his fingers digging into my skin, and he started slapping me, hard, over and over. My head snapped to the side with each blow. Amber stood there counting. 1, 2, 3. She was laughing, actually enjoying watching my son hit me. 4, 5, 6. I tried to cover my face, but he pulled my hands away. 7, 8, 9. I started crying, begging him to stop. 10, 11, 12. Then he finally stopped, breathing hard, his face red with rage. He told me I was lucky he did not do worse. He said I needed to learn respect. Then he and Amber left. They got dressed up and went out to a bar to celebrate. I heard Amber tell him she was proud of him for finally putting me in my place. I sat on the kitchen floor for a long time after they left, my face swelling, my tears mixing with the coffee on the floor. But through the pain and humiliation, something clicked in my brain. I remembered something important. I was still on the deed to this house. My name was on the mortgage, right along with Brandon's. I had kept copies of all the paperwork in a safety deposit box that Gerald had set up years ago, and I still had the key to Brandon's home office, where he kept all his important documents. That night, while they were out celebrating my abuse, I went into Brandon's office. I was looking for the deed, wanting to confirm what I remembered, but I found something else, something that made my blood run cold. There were documents spread out on his desk. He had been careless, probably because he thought I was too broken to fight back. I saw papers from a lawyer's office, plans to have me declared mentally incompetent. They had already contacted an attorney. There were forged documents that looked like doctor's notes saying I was experiencing dementia, fake medical records, a detailed plan to get power of attorney over me and take all my money. They had been plotting this for months. The slapping was not just anger, it was calculated. They were building a case that I was difficult and unstable, trying to get me to react badly so they could claim I was dangerous. They were documenting everything, twisting it, preparing to have me locked away in a nursing home while they took everything I had left. My hands were shaking as I took photographs of every single page with my phone. I documented everything. Then I sat down at Brandon's computer and started searching for real estate lawyers in Phoenix. I found one with good reviews who specialized in property disputes. His name was Thomas Hart. I sent him an email that night, explaining my situation. I told him I was on the deed to a house, and I wanted to sell it immediately. I asked if that was legal, if I had the right to do it. I did not sleep that night. I just waited for a response, my face throbbing, my heart pounding. Thomas Hart called me first thing the next morning. He was a sharp 65-year-old attorney with a no-nonsense manner. I explained everything to him over the phone while Brandon was at work and Amber was at her part-time job at a boutique downtown. I told him about the co-signing, about my down payment, about the abuse, about the documents I found. He asked me to come to his office immediately and bring all the paperwork I had. Within 2 hours, I was sitting across from him in his conference room, showing him copies of the deed, the mortgage, the photos of Brandon's scheme to declare me incompetent. Thomas reviewed everything carefully. Then he looked up at me and said something I will never forget. He said, "Mrs. Hutchins, you have every legal right to sell this property. Your name is on the deed. You are equally responsible for the mortgage. In Arizona, any co-owner can initiate a sale. Your son cannot stop you." I felt a surge of hope for the first time in months. I asked him how quickly we could do it. He smiled and told me he had a client who had been desperately searching for a house in that exact neighborhood. A cash buyer who was willing to pay full price for a quick close. The house was worth $450,000 based on recent sales in the area. Thomas made a phone call right there in front of me. Within an hour, his client came to the office. His name was Arthur Green, and he was a 72-year-old retired engineer. He was kind, soft-spoken, and extremely interested in the house. He had been looking for 6 months and had lost out on 3 other properties to higher bidders. We arranged everything in that one day. Arthur agreed to pay $450,000 in cash. We would waive inspections to speed things up. We set a 7-day close. I signed all the paperwork with shaking hands. It felt surreal, like I was in a dream. Thomas explained that I would get back my original $50,000 down payment, plus my share of the equity. After paying off the remaining mortgage and closing costs, my share would be about $100,000. Brandon would get nothing because he had not contributed anything to the down payment, and the equity would be split between us. But I was selling at a small loss to make the sale happen quickly, which meant his share was minimal and would go to closing costs. That afternoon, I rented a small furnished apartment across town. It was tiny, just a studio, but it was mine. Over the next few days, while Brandon and Amber went about their lives completely unaware, I quietly moved my belongings. I did not have much. Most of my furniture had been sold with the old house. I just had my clothes, some photos, a few keepsakes from my marriage to Gerald. For those 7 days, I pretended everything was normal. I cooked meals, cleaned the house, stayed quiet. Brandon and Amber thought I was broken, defeated. They were planning their next moves, probably finalizing their scheme to take control of my life. They had no idea what was coming. On the 7th day, the closing happened. Arthur's cash was wired to the title company. The deed transferred to his name. The house was sold. I immediately went to the bank and transferred the $325,000 from the joint account with Brandon into a new account in only my name. Then I transferred the $100,000 from the house sale into that same account. I had $425,000, safely away from Brandon's reach. That evening, Brandon came home from work like usual. I was standing in the foyer with my 2 suitcases packed. My purse was over my shoulder. I had my car keys in my hand. He stopped when he saw me. "Where are you going?" he asked, confused. I did not say anything. I just pointed to the kitchen counter where I had left the papers. The sale documents, the deed transfer, everything. Brandon walked over and picked them up. I watched his face as he read. It went white first, then red, then almost purple. His hands started shaking. He looked up at me with an expression I had never seen before. Pure rage mixed with disbelief. "What did you do?" he whispered. "I sold the house," I said calmly. "It was mine to sell. My name was on the deed. You have 30 days to vacate per the sale agreement. The new owner takes possession in 30 days. Brandon lunged toward me, but I stepped back toward the door. "Don't touch me again, Brandon," I said firmly. "I have photos of what you did to me. I have evidence of your plan to declare me incompetent. If you lay one hand on me, I will go straight to the police." That is when Amber came down the stairs. She had heard everything, and then something happened that I did not expect. They both started laughing. Brandon actually laughed. "You stupid old woman," he said. "Do you really think you can just sell our house? I am going to sue you for everything. I am going to have you arrested. You are going to prison for elder abuse fraud." That's right, elder abuse. Because you manipulated and defrauded your own son. Amber walked over and stood next to him. "We already talked to a lawyer last week," she said smugly. "We knew you would try something crazy eventually. That is why we have been documenting everything. We have recordings of you acting unstable. We have witnesses who will say you are senile. You just handed us everything we need to destroy you." My confidence wavered. I had not expected this. They had prepared for me to fight back. They had been planning this longer and deeper than I realized. Brandon continued. "And by the way, Mom, that joint account? I emptied it this morning. All $325,000. I transferred it to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Good luck getting it back." You will spend years in legal battles trying to recover it. You will die broke and alone in some state-run nursing home." My heart stopped. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and checked my banking app. He was right. The account showed a zero balance. The transfer had happened at 9 o'clock this morning, hours before I moved the house sale money. I had been too slow. I had $100,000 from the house, but my life savings were gone. "Get out now," Brandon said coldly, "or I am calling the police and telling them you attacked me. Your choice." Amber held up her phone, finger hovering over the screen, ready to dial 911. I had no choice. I picked up my suitcases and walked out of that house. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely get my key in the car door. I drove to my new apartment and sat in the parking lot for 30 minutes, crying so hard I could not catch my breath. I had thought I was being smart. I had thought I was fighting back. But Brandon and Amber had been 3 steps ahead of me the whole time. I had lost most of my money, and I might be facing legal consequences. I felt like a complete fool. 2 days later, a process server knocked on my apartment door. I was being sued. Brandon and Amber were suing me for fraudulent sale of property, financial elder abuse, emotional distress, and they were demanding $500,000 in damages. The lawsuit documents were thick and full of legal language I barely understood. But the basic claim was clear. They were saying I had manipulated and coerced them into putting me on the deed 2 years ago when they bought the house. They claimed I had threatened to withhold the down payment money unless they added my name. They said I had then fraudulently sold their home without their knowledge or consent while they were at work. They painted me as a greedy, manipulative old woman who had taken advantage of her grieving son after his father's death. It was all lies, but it was written in such convincing legal language that it sounded credible. I used some of my remaining money to hire a lawyer. Her name was Patricia Henderson, a tough 58-year-old litigator who came highly recommended. She had short gray hair, sharp eyes, and a no-nonsense attitude. We met in her office, and I explained everything to her. Patricia reviewed the lawsuit carefully. Then she looked at me with concern. "Mrs. Hutchins, I need to be honest with you. This is going to be expensive and ugly. They have a case, even though it is fraudulent. Without solid proof of their scheme to defraud you, this could go either way in court. Judges see a lot of elder abuse cases, but they also see a lot of family disputes, where both sides claim the other is lying." I showed her the photos I had taken of the documents in Brandon's office, the plans to have me declared incompetent. She studied them on my phone, zooming in to read the details. "This might help," she said slowly, "but they will claim these documents are fake, or taken out of context, or that you misunderstood what you were seeing. We need more evidence. We need bank records, emails, text messages, witnesses. Without that, this becomes a he said, she said situation, and those are very difficult to win." She told me her retainer fee was $15,000, and the total cost to fight the lawsuit properly could be anywhere from $60,000 to $80,000. I felt sick. I only had about $85,000 left after paying her retainer and my rent and living expenses. If I fought this case, I would be broke, even if I won. Over the next 3 weeks, my life became a waking nightmare. Brandon launched a harassment campaign against me. He called my friends from church, telling them I had gone crazy and stolen from him. He called my former neighbors, spreading the same lies. He posted on social media about how his mentally unstable mother had defrauded him. People I had known for decades started avoiding me. One of my oldest friends, a woman named Dorothy, who I had known for 30 years, called me. She said she did not know what to believe anymore. She said Brandon sounded so convincing, so hurt. She asked me if maybe I was confused, if maybe the grief over Gerald's death had affected my thinking. It broke my heart that even she was doubting me. The stress was destroying my health. I started having terrible headaches. My blood pressure shot up so high that I had to go to an urgent care clinic. The doctor put me on medication and warned me that stress was killing me. I needed to find a way to calm down or I could have a stroke or heart attack. But I could not calm down. I was not sleeping more than 2 or 3 hours a night. I would lie awake in my tiny studio apartment, staring at the ceiling, going over everything again and again. How had I let this happen? How had I not seen what Brandon was becoming? Where had I gone wrong as a mother? I stopped eating properly. Food tasted like cardboard. I lost 12 pounds in 3 weeks. I looked haggard and exhausted, which actually helped Brandon's case that I was mentally unwell. Then, 3 weeks into this nightmare, Patricia called me with devastating news. Brandon had filed for a restraining order against me. He claimed I had been stalking him and threatening him. He had submitted evidence to the court. Text messages that appeared to come from my phone number, threatening violence against him and Amber. Voicemail recordings that sounded like my voice, saying horrible things about how I was going to make them pay, how I was going to hurt them. I was stunned. I never sent those messages, I told Patricia. I never called them. I have not contacted them at all since I moved out. Patricia believed me, but she explained that the messages looked real. The texts showed my phone number. The voicemails sounded like me. Brandon also had a witness, Amber's sister Jessica, who signed an affidavit saying she had seen me outside Brandon's workplace twice, sitting in my car, watching the building. That was completely false. I had never gone anywhere near his workplace. But how could I prove a negative? How could I prove I was not there? The restraining order hearing was held in family court. I had to sit there while Brandon testified about how scared he was of me, how I had become increasingly unstable and threatening. He cried real tears. He was convincing. Amber testified too, describing how terrified she was, how she could not sleep at night worrying that I would break into their house and hurt them. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s named Judge Martha Crawford, reviewed the evidence. She looked at the threatening text messages and listened to the voicemail recordings. Then she looked at me, sitting there in my wrinkled clothes, my face gaunt from stress and weight loss, my hands shaking. She granted a temporary restraining order. I was ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from Brandon, Amber, their home, their workplaces, and any place they frequented. Violating the order could result in immediate arrest and jail time. Patricia pulled me aside after the hearing. Mrs. Hutchins, you need to be extremely careful. Do not go anywhere near them, even by accident. Do not try to contact them in any way. They are setting traps for you. If you violate this order, even accidentally, you could go to jail. But it got worse. A week after the restraining order, Brandon filed a police report. He claimed that the $325,000 in the joint account had been his money, not joint funds. He said I had stolen it without permission. He provided the bank with falsified documents that made it look like he had been the only one depositing money into that account. A police detective named Marcus Dunn contacted me. He was in his 40s, professional but skeptical. He came to my apartment and asked me questions about the money. I explained that it had been my money from the sale of my house, that Brandon had suggested the joint account, that I had every right to transfer my own money. Detective Dunn listened, but I could tell he was not entirely convinced. He said the bank records Brandon provided told a different story. He said there would be an investigation. He warned me not to leave the county, because I might be facing criminal charges for theft and fraud. After he left, I collapsed on my couch and sobbed. I was facing a civil lawsuit, a restraining order, and now potential criminal charges. I was isolated from my community. My money was disappearing into legal fees. My health was failing. I sat there in that tiny apartment, alone, and thought seriously about giving up. Maybe Brandon was right. Maybe I should just surrender. Maybe I should sign over everything I had left, admit to wrongdoing, and accept whatever punishment came. At least then it would be over. I was 67 years old, tired, broken, and I could not see any way out of this nightmare. 1 week later, on a Thursday morning, there was a loud knock on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and saw 2 police officers standing there. My heart started racing. I knew what this was. I opened the door. "Rachel Hutchins?" one of them asked. "Yes," I whispered. "You are under arrest for grand theft and fraud. Please turn around and put your hands behind your back." They handcuffed me right there in my apartment hallway. My neighbor across the hall opened her door and stared as they led me away. I had never been arrested in my entire life. I had never even gotten a speeding ticket. The humiliation was overwhelming. They took me to the police station, fingerprinted me, photographed me like a criminal. They put me in a holding cell with 2 other women. I sat on the metal bench, wearing handcuffs, unable to stop shaking. This could not be real. This could not be happening. Patricia arranged my bail. It was set at $25,000. I had to pay 10% to a bail bondsman, which meant $2,500 I would never get back. Patricia picked me up from the jail that evening. I had been there for 8 hours. It felt like 8 years. The charges are serious, Patricia told me as we drove to my apartment. Grand theft over $20,000 is a felony in Arizona. You could face years in prison if convicted. But it was my money, I said, my voice hoarse from crying. I know, she said gently, but we have to prove that. And right now, their documentation looks more convincing than ours. The next day, a local news website ran a story. The headline read, "Elderly woman arrested for defrauding son out of hundreds of thousands." The article was short but damaging. It described me as a widow who had allegedly manipulated her grieving son and stolen his money. There was a quote from Brandon. "My mother has not been herself since my father died." I tried to help her, but she became increasingly paranoid and aggressive. I never thought she would go this far. My wife and I are devastated. The article was shared on social media. People I had never met commented, calling me horrible names, saying I should rot in prison, saying I was a disgrace to mothers everywhere. A few people sent me hate messages through social media. One person found my address somehow and sent a letter calling me evil. My landlord called me 2 days later. He said he had seen the news article. He said that while he could not evict me for being arrested, he would prefer if I found another place to live when my lease was up in 2 months. He did not want problems at his property. I was being driven out of my home again. I spent days looking at apartment listings online, but my money was running so low. After bail and legal fees, I had about $40,000 left. That would not last long. The preliminary hearing for the criminal case was held 3 weeks later. I had to sit in a courtroom while a prosecutor presented evidence against me. They had bank statements that Brandon had somehow altered or misrepresented. They had his testimony and Amber's testimony. They had Jessica testifying that I had seemed confused and unstable when she met me. They made me sound like a calculating thief who had taken advantage of her own son. My lawyer argued that this was a civil dispute, not a criminal matter, that the money in the joint account had been mine, that I had documentation proving I sold my house and deposited the proceeds into that account. But the judge, an older man named Judge Richard Foley, seemed skeptical. He said there was enough evidence to proceed to trial. The trial was scheduled for 4 months away. 4 months. I had to wait 4 months to clear my name, while my reputation was destroyed, my money evaporated, and my health deteriorated. I did not know if I could survive 4 months. Through his attorney, Brandon made me an offer to settle everything. He would drop all the criminal charges and the civil lawsuit under certain conditions. I had to sign over all my remaining assets to him. I had to admit publicly that I had stolen from him and apologize. I had to agree to never contact him or Amber again for the rest of my life. I had to enter a nursing home and give him power of attorney to manage my care. Essentially, he wanted me to surrender everything, admit I was a criminal, and let him control the rest of my life. In exchange, I would not go to prison. Patricia told me honestly, "Rachel, if you go to trial and lose, you could face 5 to 10 years in prison. At your age, that is essentially a life sentence. You would die in prison. Maybe you should consider taking this deal. At least you would be safe in a nursing home, even if Brandon controls your care." I sat in her office, staring at the settlement papers. My son wanted me to give up everything, admit to crimes I did not commit, and let him warehouse me in a nursing home where I would have no freedom, no money, no dignity. I would be his prisoner for whatever years I had left. I thought about Gerald. I thought about what he would want me to do. Would he want me to fight, even if I lost everything? Or would he want me to survive, even if it meant surrendering? I was about to sign the papers when my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. "Mrs. Hutchins?" a man's voice said. "This is Arthur Green. I bought your house, or rather, your son's house. We met briefly during the sale." "Yes, I remember," I said quietly. "I need to speak with you urgently," he said. "I found something in the house after your son and his wife moved out. Something I think you need to see. Can we meet?" I met Arthur Green at a coffee shop the next morning. He was a tall, lean man with white hair and kind blue eyes. He had been a colonel in the army before becoming an engineer. There was something solid and dependable about him. He was carrying a large folder. He sat down across from me and slid it across the table. "I found this in the garage," he said, "hidden in a box behind some old paint cans. Your son must have forgotten about it when they moved out." I opened the folder. Inside were documents, printed emails, bank statements, and receipts. As I read through them, my hands started shaking. Brandon had been stealing from his employer. For over a year, he had been submitting false expense reports, claiming reimbursement for business trips he never took, meals he never ate, hotel stays that never happened. The amounts were shocking. Over 18 months, he had stolen almost $60,000 from the pharmaceutical company. But there was more. He had been stealing drugs from his company's sample inventory and selling them. Not controlled substances that would trigger immediate investigation, but expensive medications like insulin and cancer drugs that he could sell online or to people without insurance. That was another $40,000. And there was more still. He had opened credit cards in other people's names, including Gerald's name, my dead husband. Brandon had used Gerald's social security number and identity to open 3 credit cards after he died, running up balances of over $30,000. That was identity theft, fraud against a deceased person. Arthur pointed to a printed text message conversation. "This is what really concerned me," he said. The texts were between Brandon and someone named DeMarco. I read them with growing horror. DeMarco: "You owe me $85,000. Time is up." Brandon: "I need more time. I am working on getting money from my mother." DeMarco: "I do not care where you get it. Pay me by the end of the month, or you will regret it." Brandon: "Please, I have a wife. Do not hurt us." DeMarco: "Then pay what you owe. Last warning." There were dozens of messages like this, going back months. Brandon owed money to someone dangerous. That was why he needed my money so desperately. He was not just greedy, he was in debt to criminals. "Who is DeMarco?" I asked Arthur. "I did some research," Arthur said. "He is a loan shark who operates in Phoenix. He lends money at extremely high interest rates to people who cannot get legitimate loans, usually for gambling debts. He has a reputation for violence when people do not pay." Everything suddenly made sense. Brandon's desperation, the elaborate scheme to steal my money, the cruelty and violence. He was not just a bad son, he was a desperate man trying to save himself. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked Arthur. "Because you are being prosecuted for crimes you did not commit," he said simply. "Because I am a retired military officer, and I believe in justice. Because someone needs to stand up for you. And frankly, because I like you, Mrs. Hutchins. When we met during the sale, you struck me as a decent person in a terrible situation. This evidence could change everything." I took the folder to Patricia immediately. She reviewed everything carefully, her eyes getting wider as she read. "This is substantial," she said. "This shows motive. This shows Brandon had reasons to steal from you. This could turn the entire case around." She made copies of everything and contacted Detective Dunn. To his credit, Detective Dunn took the evidence seriously. He began investigating Brandon's employer. Within 3 days, they confirmed it. Brandon had been embezzling. The pharmaceutical company had suspected something was wrong with his expense reports, but had not been able to prove it until now. They had been planning their own investigation. 1 week later, Brandon was arrested at his workplace. Federal agents took him into custody because wire fraud and mail fraud are federal crimes. The charges included embezzlement, identity theft, fraud, and multiple counts of theft. He was facing 20 to 30 years in federal prison if convicted. The criminal charges against me were immediately dropped. The prosecutor called Patricia and apologized. They realized Brandon and Amber had fabricated evidence against me. The civil lawsuit was withdrawn. The restraining order was lifted. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. My name was cleared. I was vindicated. The truth had finally come out. But my relief lasted exactly 2 days. On a Tuesday evening, I was in my apartment making dinner when there was a heavy knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw 2 large men in suits standing there. My stomach dropped. I knew immediately this was not a social call. I opened the door with the chain still on. "Can I help you?" "Rachel Hutchins?" one of them said. He was huge, probably 6 feet 4 inches tall, with cold eyes. "Yes? We need to have a conversation. Let us in." "I do not think so. Who are you?" The man smiled, but it was not friendly. "My name is DeMarco. I think you know that name. Let us in, or we will make this difficult." I thought about calling the police, but something in his manner told me that would make things worse. With shaking hands, I removed the chain and opened the door. The 2 men came inside. DeMarco sat on my couch like he owned the place. The other man stood by the door, blocking my exit. "Here is the situation," DeMarco said calmly. "Your son owes me money. A lot of money. $85,000 plus interest that has been accumulating for 6 months. He is in federal custody now, so he cannot pay me. That means the debt transfers to family." "That is not how debt works," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I did not borrow money from you." "It is how my debt works," DeMarco said. His voice was soft, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Your son used my money. He promised to pay me back. He did not. Someone has to make this right. You are his mother. You pay." "I do not have $85,000, I said. That was true. I had about $38,000 left after all the legal fees. "Then you better figure out how to get it," DeMarco said. "You have 2 weeks. If you do not pay, there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" I asked, though I did not really want to know. DeMarco smiled that terrible smile again. "Use your imagination, Mrs. Hutchins. You seem like a smart woman, smart enough to sell a house out from under your own son. I am sure you are smart enough to figure this out." He stood up. 2 weeks. I will be in touch about where to deliver the money. Then they left. I locked the door and immediately called Patricia, but she said there was nothing we could do legally. Without proof of the threat, the police could not help me. DeMarco knew exactly how to threaten people without leaving evidence. I had to come up with $85,000 in 2 weeks, or something terrible would happen. I did not have it. I had no way to get it. I was trapped again, just when I thought I was free. I realized I needed to talk to Brandon, as much as I hated the idea. I visited him in federal detention. He was being held without bail because he was considered a flight risk. When they brought him into the visiting room, he looked different, smaller somehow, defeated. He sat down across from me, separated by a glass partition. We picked up the phones. "Mom," he said, and his voice broke. "Brandon, DeMarco came to see me," I said without preamble. "He wants his money. He threatened me." Brandon's face went white. "Oh God. Oh no. Mom, I am so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. Tell me everything," I said. And he did. The whole story came pouring out. How he had started gambling online 3 years ago. How he lost money, kept trying to win it back, lost more. How he borrowed from DeMarco when he could not get a legitimate loan. How the debt grew with interest. How he panicked when DeMarco started threatening Amber. How he had come up with the plan to steal my money to pay off the debt. How everything spiraled out of control. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said, crying now. "But DeMarco said he would kill Amber. He showed me pictures of other people he had hurt. I was terrified. I thought if I could just get enough money to pay him off, everything would be okay. But then you sold the house and I panicked. I thought if I could destroy you legally, make you look incompetent. I could force you to give me the money. I was desperate. I made terrible choices. I became a monster. I sat there looking at my son, this person I had raised, who had once been a sweet little boy who cried when he accidentally stepped on a caterpillar. What had happened to him? "Mom, please," Brandon said. "You have to pay DeMarco. He will hurt you. He might kill you. Please." I visited Amber too. She was not in jail but was facing her own charges as an accomplice. She agreed to meet me at a coffee shop. She looked terrible, like she had not slept in weeks. "Mrs. Hutchins," she said, "I know you have no reason to believe me, but I am so sorry. I was a terrible person. I encouraged Brandon. I enjoyed hurting you. There is something wrong with me, and I am getting help now, but that does not excuse what I did." She told me that DeMarco had threatened her too, years ago. That was when Brandon first started his scheme. She was terrified of DeMarco and terrified of losing Brandon to prison. Fear had turned her into someone cruel. "Has DeMarco contacted you?" I asked. She nodded. "He called me yesterday. He said if he does not get his money from someone in your family, he will hurt all of us. We were united now by a common threat. Despite everything they had done to me, we had to work together to survive. I did not know what to do until I thought of Arthur Green. I called him and explained everything. To my surprise, he offered to help. "Mrs. Hutchins, I am a retired colonel," he said. "I have connections, friends in security contracting. Let me make some calls." 2 days later, Arthur arranged a meeting with DeMarco. But Arthur brought 3 other men with him, large, serious men who were clearly military veterans. They met DeMarco at a restaurant downtown. Arthur called me afterward. "It is handled," he said. "I negotiated. You will pay $50,000. That is all you have left anyway. Brandon will work off the rest when he eventually gets out of prison." DeMarco agreed because he saw he was outmatched by my associates and realized getting something is better than getting nothing from people who have nothing left to take. "He will leave you alone." I gave DeMarco my last $50,000. Everything I had worked for my entire life, gone. I was 67 years old with $800 in my checking account. I had nothing left. I could not afford my apartment anymore. The lease was ending and I did not have money for another month's rent. I started looking at homeless shelters, trying to figure out where I would go. At 67 years old, I was about to be homeless. Then Arthur called me. "Rachel," he said, and we were on a first-name basis now after everything we had been through. "I have a proposal for you. My wife died 3 years ago from cancer. I have been living alone in that big house ever since. I have 3 spare bedrooms. Why do not you live with me? Not romantically, just as housemates. You could help with cooking and managing the house, and you would have a safe place to live rent-free. We are both alone. We could help each other." I was hesitant. I had trusted Brandon and look where that got me. But Arthur had proven himself trustworthy. He had helped me when he had no obligation to do so. And I was desperate. "Just a trial period," he said. "If it does not work out, no hard feelings." I moved into Arthur's house, the same house that had belonged to Brandon. It was strange being back there, but Arthur had already redecorated. It looked completely different. He gave me a bedroom with a private bathroom and told me to make myself at home. Those first few weeks were awkward. We were like 2 polite strangers sharing space, but slowly, we started to relax around each other. Arthur was kind and respectful. He gave me space, but was there if I needed to talk. We started cooking dinner together, watching old movies, playing cards in the evening. Arthur had served in Vietnam. He had lost friends in the war. He understood trauma and grief. We talked about our spouses, about what we had lost, about how hard it was to start over at our age. We became genuine friends. One evening, Arthur's daughter Samantha visited from Seattle. She was in her 40s, a successful businesswoman who ran an event planning company. Over dinner, I mentioned that I was looking for work but having no luck due to my age. Samantha looked at me thoughtfully. "Rachel, I could use someone to help coordinate some of my events remotely. Answer emails, manage schedules, handle logistics. It is not full-time, but it pays $2,000 a month. Would you be interested? I was shocked. Yes, absolutely. Great. You start next week. Just like that, I had a job. It was not much money, but combined with my Social Security that was finally starting, I would have about $3,800 a month. I could survive on that. For the first time in nearly a year, I felt stable. I had a home, a job, a friend. I was not rich, but I was okay. My Social Security checks started coming in, adding another $1,800 a month to my income. Brandon's trial happened 4 months later. I attended. He pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. 7 years in federal prison. He would be 53 when he was released. Before his sentencing, he asked to see me one more time. I almost said no, but something made me go to the detention center one last time. Brandon looked different. He had lost weight in jail. He looked older, more serious. When he sat down across from me, there was no manipulation in his eyes anymore, just genuine remorse. "Mom," he said, "I do not deserve to talk to you. I do not deserve your time, but I need you to know something. I have been in therapy here, real therapy. I have been going to addiction support groups. I am facing what I did, what I became. I destroyed both our lives. I hurt you in ways I can never repair." He told me he had found an offshore account he had forgotten about. There was $20,000 in it from my original money that he had not spent yet. He was signing it over to me. It was not much compared to what he had taken, but it was something. "I am going to spend every day of the next 7 years becoming someone who deserves your forgiveness," he said. "I know I can never make this right, but I am going to try to be better. I am going to try to be the son you deserved." I did not know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to tell him how much he had destroyed. But part of me saw my little boy again, the child I had raised, who had lost his way so completely. "I hope you find yourself in there, Brandon," I said finally. "I hope you figure out who you really are." Amber came to see me too, before her own sentencing. She brought papers, a full written confession of everything she and Brandon had done. It was signed and notarized. "I know this does not fix anything," she said, "but I want you to have this in case you ever need it. And I want you to know, I am sorry. I became someone I do not recognize. I am in therapy now too. I am trying to figure out how I became so cruel." Amber received 3 years of probation and 500 hours of community service. She had to move back to Ohio to live with her parents. Her life as she knew it was over too. I took the $20,000 Brandon gave me and combined it with my savings from my new job. I had about $28,000. It was not much, but it was a start. Living with Arthur turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me. We became close friends, true companions. We helped each other heal. He understood loss and trauma in ways most people could not. I helped him deal with his grief over his wife. He helped me deal with mine over Gerald and the betrayal by Brandon. One day, Arthur said something that stuck with me. "Rachel, you saved my life too. I was so lonely I was thinking about not being here anymore. Having you here, having someone to talk to and share life with, it gave me purpose again. We were saving each other." But just when I thought life was finally settling down, I got another legal notice in the mail. Brandon's former employer, the pharmaceutical company, was suing me. They claimed I had benefited from Brandon's theft because the house he bought with stolen money had been sold, and I received proceeds from that sale. They wanted $150,000 for unjust enrichment. After everything, I was being sued again. I sat in Arthur's kitchen holding the papers, feeling like I could not breathe. Would this nightmare ever end? Patricia reviewed the case and said it was weak legally. The company was grasping at straws, but defending against it would cost at least $30,000. Money I did not have. I felt defeated again. Every time I started to recover, something knocked me back down. I was exhausted. I was tired of fighting, but something inside me refused to quit. I had survived Brandon's abuse, false arrest, a loan shark, poverty, and near homelessness. I was not going to let a corporation destroy me now. When word got out about the lawsuit, something unexpected happened. A local news reporter heard about my story and wanted to do a piece on it. This time, the angle was completely different. The story was titled, "Elderly Widow Persecuted After Son's Crimes. Community Rallies to Help." The reporter interviewed me, and I told the whole truth. The abuse, the arrests, the betrayal, the loan shark, everything. The story aired on the local evening news and was shared online. The response was overwhelming. People were outraged on my behalf. A church group I did not even belong to started a legal defense fund for me. Donations started coming in. $5 here, $10 there, $20 from someone else, hundreds of people contributing what they could. Within 2 weeks, over $40,000 had been raised. I was stunned. Strangers were helping me. People who did not know me, but believed my story and wanted to help. It restored my faith in humanity. Arthur contributed $10,000 to the fund. "You are family now," he said. "This is what family does." Samantha used her business connections to find me a high-powered attorney willing to take my case pro bono for the good publicity. Her name was Caroline Hughes, and she was a force of nature. She was in her 50s, brilliant, aggressive, and she smelled corporate overreach like a bloodhound. Caroline built a strong case. She argued that I had no knowledge of Brandon's crimes when they were committed. The house was purchased with legitimate funds, my own down payment and a mortgage that I co-signed. I had every legal right to sell it. The pharmaceutical company was trying to recover their losses from an innocent third party rather than pursuing Brandon's actual stolen assets. Caroline discovered something crucial through her investigation. The pharmaceutical company had known about irregularities in Brandon's expense reports for over a year, but had failed to investigate properly. They had poor internal controls and had essentially let Brandon steal from them through negligence. Now they were embarrassed and trying to save face with their shareholders by recovering money from anyone they could find. Caroline launched a public relations campaign. She got me booked on local television news shows. I appeared on 3 different stations, telling my story. A widow who lost her husband, was brutalized by her son, falsely arrested, threatened by criminals, and was now being victimized again by a corporation trying to cover up its own failures. The story went viral on social media. People shared it thousands of times. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive. People were angry at the pharmaceutical company. They organized a boycott of the company's products. They wrote angry letters to the CEO. The pharmaceutical company's stock price actually dropped 2% over the bad publicity. That got the attention of their board of directors. Customers were threatening to switch to competitors. Employees were embarrassed to work there. The media was having a field day with the story of a heartless corporation persecuting an elderly abuse victim. Within 3 weeks, the pharmaceutical company's lawyers contacted Caroline with a settlement offer. They would drop the lawsuit entirely and issue a public apology. More than that, they would pay me $75,000 as what they called a gesture of goodwill to help me rebuild my life after what their employee had done to me. Caroline negotiated hard. She got them to agree to release a public statement taking responsibility for their failure to detect Brandon's theft earlier and acknowledging that I was an innocent victim. The statement was issued to all the media outlets that had covered the story. I won. After everything, I actually won. My reputation was fully restored. The community knew the truth. I received the $75,000 from the pharmaceutical company. The legal defense fund had raised $42,000, and after paying Caroline's reduced fees for her time, there was still $12,000 left. The fund organizers gave it all to me. Combined with what I had saved from working for Samantha, I now had close to $100,000. I was not wealthy, but I was secure. I could survive. I could rebuild. Arthur and I continued living together, and our friendship deepened into something beautiful. It was not romantic love, but it was real love nonetheless. We were partners, companions, best friends. We took care of each other. We gave each other purpose. I continued working for Samantha and discovered I was actually good at event planning. She gave me more responsibilities and increased my pay to $2,500 a month. I enjoyed the work. It made me feel useful and competent. I also started volunteering at a support group for elder abuse victims. I wanted to help others who were going through what I had experienced. I wanted them to know they were not alone, that survival was possible, that there was hope. Brandon was now 2 years into his 7-year sentence. Something had genuinely changed in him. He completed every educational program the prison offered. He got his master's degree through a prison education program. He worked in the prison library, helping other inmates learn to read. He mentored younger prisoners, trying to keep them from making his mistakes. His letters showed real growth and maturity. He never made excuses. He took full responsibility. He was in intensive therapy dealing with his gambling addiction and the choices he had made. I could see he was becoming a different person. I visited him every 2 months. Our relationship was healing, slowly. I had set firm boundaries. I would support his growth, but I would never forget what he did. Trust would have to be earned back over many years, if ever. I realized something important through all of this. Forgiveness is not about forgetting. It is not about excusing terrible behavior. Forgiveness is about releasing the poison of hatred so it does not destroy you from the inside. I forgave Brandon for my own sake, not for his. I would never forget the 12 slaps, the cruelty, the betrayal, the year of hell he put me through. But I would not let those memories poison the rest of my life. Amber completed her probation. She sent me a long letter from Ohio, where she was working as a waitress and attending therapy twice a week. She apologized again and asked for nothing in return. She said she understood if I never wanted to speak to her again. I wrote back wishing her well, but making clear we would not have a relationship. That was healthy boundary setting. I could forgive her without having her in my life. The life lessons I learned through this nightmare are ones I share with other survivors now. People often ask me how I survived. They say they admire my strength, but here is the truth I tell them. I did not feel strong during most of it. I felt weak, terrified, and broken. There were many days I wanted to give up, days I thought about ending my own life because the pain was too much. But I learned something crucial about strength. Real strength is not about never falling down. It is about getting up one more time than you are knocked down. It is about refusing to let cruelty make you cruel. It is about setting boundaries without building walls around your heart. It is about forgiving without forgetting, about learning to trust again without being naive. I learned that family is not just about blood. Arthur became more family to me than my own son was during those dark months. True family is defined by who shows up when you are at your worst, who stands beside you when you have nothing to offer them in return. Those strangers who donated $5 or $10 to my legal fund, they were family too. They were proof that goodness still exists in this world. I learned that you are never too old to start over. At 67 years old, I lost everything and had to rebuild from nothing. I found new purpose, made new friends, discovered abilities I did not know I had. Age is not a barrier to resilience. You are never too old to fight for yourself, never too old to create a meaningful life. I learned that justice does not always come from courts or lawyers, though they can help. Sometimes justice comes from community, from people standing together and saying enough is enough. Those hundreds of people who donated to help me, who shared my story, who put pressure on that pharmaceutical company, they delivered justice in a way no court ever could. They reminded me that I mattered, that my life had value, that I deserved to be treated with dignity. Most importantly, I learned that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Brandon hurt me more than I can fully express in words. The physical violence was terrible, but the emotional betrayal was worse. Knowing that my own son, the child I carried and raised and loved, could treat me that way, nearly destroyed me. But I realized that staying angry would not hurt him. It would only hurt me. It would kill my spirit, steal my peace, make me bitter and hard. Forgiveness set me free. Not forgiveness where I pretended it never happened or said it was okay, but forgiveness where I acknowledged the harm, set boundaries, and chose not to carry the weight of hatred anymore. To anyone reading this story or hearing it who is facing betrayal, abuse, or injustice, I want to say this directly to you. Fight back. You are worth fighting for. But fight with truth, not cruelty. Fight with resilience, not revenge. Document everything that happens to you. Take photos, save messages, keep records. You will need them. Seek help from lawyers, counselors, support groups, friends. Do not be ashamed of what happened to you. You are not weak for being victimized. You are strong for surviving it. Remember that your worst day is not your last day. When I was sitting in that jail cell, I thought my life was over. When DeMarco threatened me, I thought I would die. When I was down to $800 with nowhere to live, I thought I had nothing left, but there was always tomorrow. There was always another chance. There was always hope, even when I could not see it. The life I have now, built from the ashes of what I lost, is more authentic and meaningful than anything I had before. I know who my real friends are. I know what really matters. I do not take anything for granted. Every morning I wake up in Arthur's house, make coffee, look out at the Arizona sunrise, and feel grateful to be alive. That is something the old Rachel, before all this happened, did not always feel. Do not let the worst thing that happened to you become the only thing that defines you. You are so much more than your trauma. You are a survivor. You are stronger than you know. You are worthy of a beautiful life, of love, of peace, of joy. Do not ever let anyone convince you otherwise. The evening I am thinking about as I finish telling you this story, I am sitting on Arthur's back porch. It is a warm Sunday in spring. I am drinking lemonade, watching the sunset paint the sky over the Phoenix Mountains in shades of orange and purple. Arthur is beside me in his chair, reading the newspaper out loud because my eyes are not what they used to be. Samantha is visiting from Seattle with her 2 children, who have started calling me Grandma Rachel. They are playing in the yard, their laughter floating through the air. I touch my cheek sometimes, where Brandon slapped me. The physical marks disappeared long ago, but the memory remains. But here is what changed. I am not defined by that memory anymore. I am not defined by being a victim. I am defined by what came after, by my courage to keep fighting, by my resilience when everything seemed hopeless, by my refusal to quit, even when quitting seemed like the only option, by the love I found in unexpected places, by the community that rallied around me, by the strength I did not know I had until I needed it. Brandon will be released from federal prison in 5 more years. Maybe we will fully reconcile by then. Maybe we will not. That is a bridge I will cross when I get there. I am open to the possibility of a real relationship with him if he continues to grow and change, but I will never be naive again. Trust is earned slowly, and he has years of earning ahead of him. For now, I am content. I am safe. I am surrounded by people who genuinely care about me. I have purpose and meaning in my life, through my work and my volunteering. I have financial security, not wealth, but enough. Most importantly, I have peace. As the sun sets completely, and the first stars appear in the desert sky, I smile. I survived. I am more than survived. I have thrived. And that is the greatest victory of all. Life will knock you down. That is inevitable. People you trust with your whole heart will sometimes betray you in ways you never imagined possible. The world can seem cruel and unfair. Systems that are supposed to protect you will fail you. You will face obstacles that seem insurmountable, but you have a choice in how you respond. You can stay down, or you can stand up. You can let bitterness consume you, or you can choose healing. You can give up, or you can keep fighting. I chose to stand up. I chose healing. I chose to keep fighting, and I am so grateful I made those choices. Because the life I have now, built from nothing after losing everything, is more authentic and beautiful than I could have imagined when I was at my lowest point. You have that same choice. You have that same strength inside you, even if you cannot feel it right now. You are capable of surviving what seems unsurvivable. You are capable of rebuilding what seems irreparably broken. You are worthy of a life filled with dignity, respect, love, and peace. Never forget that. No matter what happens, no matter who hurts you, no matter how dark things get, you are worthy. You matter. Your life has value, and there is always hope for tomorrow. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you find the strength to move forward? I would love to hear your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who is struggling right now. If this story touched your heart or gave you hope, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories and realize they are not alone. And if you want to hear more stories about resilience, survival, and overcoming impossible odds, please subscribe to this channel. Share this story with someone who might need to hear it today. You never know whose life you might change by sharing a message of hope. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for caring about an old woman's journey from despair to hope. I wish you strength in your struggles, courage in your battles, and peace in your heart. Remember, you are never alone. There is always hope, there is always tomorrow, and you are always worthy of a beautiful life. Take care of yourselves, be kind to one another, and never give up.